Hey there, welcome to What the Theory. My name is Joel, and this is an examination of different philosophies to try and see if we can make sense of this damn world that we're living in. For today, I'm going to be talking about the concept of freedom. Now, I'm going to be tackling this from a peculiar aspect. This is taken from the work of Erich Fromm, which is Escape from Freedom, a work that I'm really enjoying, and fundamentally because this is post-existential, but later on in this channel we'll be discussing what freedom is from an existential point of view. Anyway, back to today. When I think about freedom, for instance, 90% of the time I think about freedom from something. Freedom from the duties that I have, freedom from oppression, freedom from, I used to be a Christian, for instance, and I felt that when I left the fold, I was escaping. I was finally getting freedom to think as I wanted to, away from dogma. But the further I got away from religion, just sort of taking my story about it, there's a period of excitement when you've left. There's a period of, now I can do anything. Everything is open to me. But then that's not a principle by which you can live your life. You're just jumping from one thing to another. You can't be defined by what you're only against. And so the work here, Fromm's argument, is that the fundamental human problem is separateness. Now, that separateness is not, you might be listening to this and going, I'm not separate. What do you mean? I have a family, I have a name, I have a company. Like, I'm connected to so many people in my community, which is true. But the point is a little bit deeper. The point is, as a person, the fact that you can say I, it means that you're capable of seeing yourself in the world as an object. You can look upon yourself and refer to yourself as an I. But that also picks you out and makes you different from everything else around you. You subjectively feel certain things that no one else can feel. You can try to communicate them, you can try to convey them in different ways, but you're using something which is a shared communication space, which is language. You didn't come into the world with your own language. There are certain feelings you have that maybe no one has ever been able to put into words. And so fundamentally, there is that separateness that we feel. Think about the way we talk about the climate, or we think about nature. We often talk about it like we're separate from nature. We don't think of ourselves as part of nature and interconnected. So that fundamental problem of human separateness, we overcome it with two things, with love and with meaningfulness, finding a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose. And the way we try to resolve this is by having a connection to something that we think is greater than ourselves, something that we can pour ourselves into. This is a reading from the book Escape from Freedom, and it talks about power. So the lust for power is not rooted in strength, but in weakness. It is the expression of the inability of an individual to stand alone and live. It is the desperate attempt to gain secondary strength where genuine strength is lacking. The word power has a twofold meaning. One is the possession of power over somebody, the ability to dominate that person. The other meaning is the possession of power to do something, to be able, to be potent. The latter meaning has nothing to do with domination. It expresses mastery in the sense of ability. And, that, what he's talking about there is almost like the desire to fill ourselves with a sense of power and belonging, and can be rooted in love. So love is a form of power. It's a form of giving of yourself. It's a form of being able and being potent and creating something positive without having to use other people as a means to an end. But power alone can also become a sense of domination. And because the languages seem quite similar, you can think of the fact that when you're in love, you want to possess another human being. You want them to be almost your property. How dare they do something against you? You want to possess all of their affection. You want to possess all of who they are. And there are social conventions that would allow for that to be the case. And so his examination there is that because total freedom, if you're in a relationship, say, with someone, at all points in time, you both have complete freedom. But you exercise your freedom for each other. You're exercising, how can I best use my freedom for this person and them for you? But then to put responsibility on them to input sort of mark on them and try to dominate them and try to make them have your will. I mean, you all know the story of like a jealous boyfriend who's trying to control his girlfriend, who's like checking her phone, who's always, hounding her about where she's going, making sure she's supposed to be in a certain place at a certain time. There is a lack of trust in that kind of relationship. And so in that form, the freedom that you have is so unbearable that you have to escape. You have to try and, control it. And, in the book, he talks about 3 different ways in which people escape from the radical freedom that they have, when they finally, put themselves into a position where they're an adult and they can make choices for themselves. And the point about being an adult is important because he sort of puts it on a timeline that if you think of how you were in childhood, early childhood, you were not very free, but it felt freeing. It felt easier. It was more comfortable because the consequences of your actions were borne by someone else. The directions for what you're supposed to do came from someone else. And as you grow older, you find that adulting is you taking on the freedom to make some choices and have consequences become true to you. They're borne by you. And there are 3 ways people can escape from freedom, that kind of freedom. And I'll break them down now for you to see and maybe digest a little bit. The first one is the authoritarian approach. That one is, the example he gives is sort of becoming like a sadomasochist. Now, if you're a sadist, you probably enjoy pain. You probably enjoy someone, bowing down to you, humiliating them and making them subservient to you. It's a way of you showing your domination. But sadists cannot exist in a vacuum. They also need masochists, people who want to be dominated, who want to, become servile and submit. Now, you can think of those as separate things, but they often also occur within the same human being. If you go back to that quote about lust for power, it's usually about a feeling of weakness. And a lot of sadists, a lot of authoritarian people are not just the heads of organizations, not just the people who wield power, but the people who are proximate to power. People who, like barnacles on a whale, they want to become part of something much larger than themselves. And they're the kind of people who just follow orders. They just say, well, I was told that this is what we're doing. This is the aim for which we wanted to, do these actions. A good example is Eichmann, when you think of the trials in Nuremberg about, the Holocaust. The people who committed a lot of those atrocities were not evil, devilish people. They were just guys who didn't have the imagination to think beyond what they were doing. They were just following authority, and that gave them a sense of purpose. And it's a very easy way in which we can abscond our responsibility as human beings by just following where power leads us, following what authority tells us to do. The second form is from conformity. And conformity, I think, is, destructiveness is the second one. Let me start with that one. Conformity is a big one. I want to close with that one. So destructiveness is, if you think about freedom being chaos, being about change, being about interdependence, it's an emergent form. No one really controls it. The authoritarian tries to control it with power, with strictures. The destructive person, because they can't grasp a hold of it, then decide to tear everything down. Because that's how they feel relevant. That's how you feel powerful. These are people who are trolls. These are people who are contrarians, people who, just for the sake of being different, just for the sake of having their indelible mark on the world, will push against everything that is happening. Destructiveness, this is from Escape from Freedom. Destructiveness, so to speak, is about the creation of values, of institutions that that are responsible for the pursuance of freedom. Change and fluidity are the engines of creativity. They are engines of love. They are engines of freedom. But that sweeps away everything that man understands. The destructive person instead would want to break things. The direct quote is this: "The more the drive towards life is thwarted, the stronger is the drive towards destruction. The more life is realized, the less the strength of destructiveness. Destructiveness is the outcome of unlived life." So you would think of someone who's quite anxious, people who, close themselves off and fantasize about, how they're going to be powerful and how they're going to be recognized in their lives. And when those realities don't come to fruition, it can become a bitter pill to swallow. And instead of swallowing that pill alone, you become the kind of individual who needs your pain to be recognized in other people. And so you destroy, and so you break things apart. And that gives you a sense of significance and power. And that is another way in which people escape the radical freedom that they have. Oddly, they're still connecting to the world, but they're connecting through it in a negative way. And then lastly, conformity. And this one, he looks at it as being an automaton. Now, this is more, if you think about it from a capitalist sort of view, the kind of person that is required to survive in the world today is an organizational person. Someone who's agreeable, someone who is creative, yes, but is not challenging too much of a status quo, who goes along to get along. The kind of person who deals in personality packages, who smiles when he needs to smile, who's, crafty and is able to, move through the culture, but is not too different, is a mass person. And through that conformity, you act like everyone else, you hold the same values. This is, a quote on someone talking about what Fromm's argument is, that the anxiety associated with our inability to express power and our fear of aloneness leads us to conform ourselves to a larger society. By acting like everyone else, holding the same values, purchasing the same products, and believing in the same morals, you gain a sense of power because you're just like everyone else. It's expectant. You're successful if you have this kind of house, if you have that kind of car, if you speak in a certain manner, if you consume certain types of products. And then you have a tailor-made personality for yourself. You have a way in which you can be recognized. And while conformity doesn't seem like a big as issue as destructiveness or authoritarianism, it's the most subtle because it prevents change. It prevents you from, actualizing your potential. And in Escape from Freedom, if there's one message that, I take away from this, is that unless you acknowledge that you can be on autopilot, unless you acknowledge that it's very easy for you to not have resistance in the world, and that is proof that you're not living up to who you need to be, you'll think of freedom as, well, I'm free because no one is putting any chains on me. But the truth is you're just moving through as a cog in the machine. And my encouragement to you is to not think of yourself that way. If you sit back and look at your life and say, am I living as the result of everyone else's way of thinking? Am I just conforming? Not to say conformity is a bad thing. I'm not here to say that just go against everything else that you've been taught and that makes you an individual. No, it's questioning why you do those things. Do you fully believe in them? Is it a fullness of your own potential, of your perspective, of your uniqueness as an individual? Are you fully embracing the freedom that you've been given? Or are you just talking about it? Thank you.